had never seen an emerald sky until that afternoon. It was beautiful. It was unnerving. My family had recently moved from the mountains of southwest Virginia to the flatlands of central Indiana. I was 8, an innocent 8-year-old. I looked 12, wished I was 15. Just a few months earlier, my stepfather purchased a mobile home for us, and we moved into a small mobile home park just west of Greenfield, Indiana. It was June. Hot, humid, a cool front was stirring in from the west, the perfect combination for an early summer tornado. That's when the sky suddenly turned emerald. The wind calmed, the sirens blew. We had no experience weathering tornadoes. The only knowledge of a tornado I had was watching The Wizard of Oz each year when it aired on TV. Of course, in that movie, it was called a twister, and I didn't know if they were the same or different. As soon as the rain and hail began, my mom and dad rushed us into the hallway of our mobile home, and we laid down. Did I tell you we had no experience when it came to tornadoes? The wind whirled outside, and the sky turned from a bright green to a rolling dark gray. Hail was pounding the tin roof of our home, and it began to gently rock back and forth. It was the first time in my little life when I was convinced beyond a doubt I was going to die. There was not a shred of uncertainty in me. I knew I was getting ready to see God. Everything was ending that afternoon, lying in the hallway with my face buried in the short shag carpet. I was praying, crying, begging God to save us. Then it occurred to me, what if I do see God? Am I ready to meet him? I mean, I'm 8, but I still need to be prepared when I stand in front of him. So I did what any Christian would do who wants to make sure he or she is ready to stand at the pearly gates. I began confessing out loud in front of my mom and stepdad. I didn't care. I wasn't going to be with them in a few minutes anyway. We were all going to die, and I couldn't help them, and they couldn't help me. So I spilled my guts. Now, I was only 8, and there wasn't a whole lot to spill. But I admitted missing schoolwork, the way I talked to my teachers, the trouble I got into that my parents didn't know anything about. I confessed everything. The whole time I'm confessing, anxiety is rising more and more inside of me until my stomach couldn't take it anymore, and out came dinner and what was left of lunch, all over the carpet of our little mobile home. Of course, we couldn't move much. The tornado was just outside our door, so we laid there for what seemed like forever. I was waiting to be carried into the air any moment and meet Jesus. Although I was covered in throw up and my eyes were swollen from crying, I figured none of that would matter in heaven anyway. We laid there in throw up and tears for about 15 minutes. And, as you might have guessed, the tornado didn't send off our mobile home into the air. The winds calmed, the hail stopped, the rain subsided, and everything was okay. I didn't see Jesus that day. The pearly gates remained a mystery. I did assist my mother with cleaning the carpet, however, and having to explain to my parents all the sinning I had been doing. After a few minutes, we emerged from our rectangular home on wheels and noticed other people outside assessing damage. I talked with some of my friends, expecting a few of them to comment on how we narrowly escaped death and how happy they were to be alive. But that's not what I discovered. My friends didn't say much about how we almost got sucked into outer space. What I heard was, how cool was that? I wanted to reply with, cool? Are you crazy? We almost died. But I just smiled and said something like, oh, so cool. It was in that moment a seed was planted into my innocent mind. Maybe I'm not like all the other kids. Maybe I'm a little different. Here's how. Fear has always been a close acquaintance of mine. As a kid and into my adult years, fear tagged along like a younger sibling. I was afraid of storms, being alone, my parents dying, developing a terminal disease, ending my life at a young age, people rejecting me, on and on it goes. I was a fearful kid, teenager, and young adult. I thought everyone was. I had no idea some people were able to pilot life without fear riding their tails. That's not me. I'm familiar with fear. It accompanied me into elementary, middle school, high school, college, marriage, and ministry. I've learned to navigate fear pretty well. So when COVID-19 hit in March, and we were told the worst case scenario could mean 2 million deaths, I was concerned, but I didn't become afraid. I'm used to fear. We're alliances now. But that's not the case for many others. Right now, we have a lot of people riddled by fear. I sense it when I watch people. If you don't believe me, let someone break out into a cough and notice how people respond. Tell someone you have a slight fever and aren't feeling well and see how they react. People are afraid to eat in restaurants, go shopping, hold hands, hug others, go to church. Now, before you get upset with me, know this. I'm not implying we have no reason to be concerned. COVID-19 is real, and people across our nation are dying, and we should be cautious. Wear the masks, wash the hands, socially distance yourself. Yes, but I'm speaking about the pervasive fear I've noticed in many people. It's beyond cautious. It is worry, distress, panic, anxiety, fear. And if you happen to be a person who's afraid or know someone who is, fear is one of the most draining emotions one can experience. Chronic fear can hinder a person's immune system, sleep cycles, cause eating disorders, lead to obsessive compulsive thoughts, mood swings, an absence of loving feelings, confusion, loss of trust, even loss of memory. Fear is like acid coursing through your emotional veins, distorting, deforming, and destroying. And no doubt, there are a few of you, possibly many of you, battling fear at this very moment. It may be COVID related, may not be, but for whatever reason, you are afraid. You are tired, worn out, you are drained. You're not just having a tough time going to sleep at night, you're afraid. You're not simply moody, you're fearful. You're not cold toward your husband or girlfriend, you're frightened. You're not just undisciplined with eating, you're battling dread. And I imagine the main reason people feel fearful, especially in our COVID-19 infested world, two reasons. One, we can't predict what's going to happen. We lack information. We get conflicting reports. We don't know who to believe. We're living in the dark about life right now. And number two, we're not in control. We feel like others are making decisions for us. They tell us what we can and can't do, where we can and can't go. We hate being out of control. So when you mix together our lack of predictability and our lack of control, it causes fear to escalate. And few experiences rise to the level of those reasons at the same time more than COVID-19. No wonder so many people are afraid. We have no idea what tomorrow will bring, and we can't do a thing about it. The perfect formula for fear. So, is there any guidance? Is there any direction? Well, in just a moment, I'm going to tell you a famous story of three young men who were faced with a situation, bringing uncertainty along with a huge reminder that they were anything but in control. Without a doubt, fear was swirling overhead, ready to perch on each of their heads and devour them for lunch. But here's what we'll also learn. In the middle of the most difficult situation these young men ever faced, they obeyed God, refused to compromise their values when it would have been much easier to do so, and left the consequences to God to sort out. And likewise, when we are faced with fear, marked by uncertainty and lack of control, like right now, we might not know what's going to happen, and we may not be able to control the outcome. But if we will do the next right thing, we can relax, knowing God will handle the rest. In chapter 3 in the book of Daniel, verses 1 through 30, the entire chapter, there's a famous story. Songs have been written about it, countless sermons have been preached on it. Here's a little context. The story takes place about 600 years before Jesus Christ was born, when King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon besieged Jerusalem and took captive many of Israel's best. Among those deported to Babylon were 4 young men from the tribe of Judah, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These 4 Hebrew youths proved themselves to be exceptionally wise. As a result, they found favor with King Nebuchadnezzar. When Daniel turned out to be the only man capable of interpreting one of Nebuchadnezzar's dreams, the king placed him in a high position over the whole province of Babylon, including over all the wise men of the land. At Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as Daniel's advisors. King Nebuchadnezzar had a huge golden image built as a symbol of his power and glory. He then commanded his people to bow down and worship at the sound of the music. Those who disobeyed would be thrown into a blazing furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego faced a huge hurdle. Do they compromise what they know is right and simply bow down, honor the king who has been overall good to them? Or do they refuse to compromise, knowing by doing so they would bring embarrassment to the king and who knows what to themselves. Before we go any further, let me ask you a question. What would you have done? If you were faced with that circumstance, what would you have done? Would you have bowed? Would you have compromised? Well, because they only worshiped the one true God of Israel, they refused to bow to the false idol. They were brought before Nebuchadnezzar to face their fate. They said to the king, "If our God, the one we serve, is able to rescue us from the furnace of flaming fire and from your power, your majesty, then let him rescue us. But if he doesn't, know this for certain, your majesty, we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you've set up." Furious, Nebuchadnezzar ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than average. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were bound and cast into the flames. The fiery blast was so hot it killed the soldiers who had escorted them. But as King Nebuchadnezzar peered into the furnace, he couldn't believe what he saw. "Look," he said, "I see 4 men unbound walking around inside the fire, and they aren't hurt, and the 4th one looks like one of the gods." Then the king called the men to come out of the furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego emerged from the flames unharmed, with not even a hair on their heads singed, or the smell of smoke on their clothing. Needless to say, this made quite an impression on Nebuchadnezzar, and he declared, "May the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be praised. He sent his messengers to rescue his servants who trusted him. They ignored the king's order, sacrificing their own bodies because they wouldn't serve or worship any god but their God." As a result, Nebuchadnezzar declared the remaining Israelites in captivity protected from harm and permitted to worship freely, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego received a promotion. What a story! Think about it. Everything in the lives of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were going well. Their talents and wisdom were being recognized. They were moving up the ranks of society. Life was overall pretty good. Then the bottom fell out. An edict is passed that no one has religious freedom anymore. And if they do not worship Nebuchadnezzar's God, they would lose their lives. Here are a few observations. Number 1, what happened to these boys was beyond their control. They were doing the best they could in a foreign land. They were minding their own business, and yet people made decisions changing life as they knew it. Number 2, they had no idea what the outcome would be. They might live, they might die. Their refusal to bow to the king's idol put them into a situation where what would happen next was beyond the pale of anyone's view. Number 3, they chose to obey God no matter what and leave the consequences to him. All right, listen. You may or may not make the connection between these 3 young men living in a foreign land 600 BC and us living in the USA in 2020. But here's what I know. Number 1, what is happening in this nation? COVID-19, political tension between the conservatives and liberals, the election in just a few weeks, the hearings for a new Supreme Court justice. It's not because of the choices you've made. Yes, of course, we can comply with health recommendations, and we can choose to vote or not vote, and we can show our support for this side or that side. But what people do or don't do is not your choice. You are one of nearly 350 million people in this nation. And contrary to what many people think, the USA is not God's selected country any more than any other nation on this earth. Most of us were just going around carrying out our daily lives, minding our own business, trying to finish projects, school, and bam, everything shuts down. Masks are required, people are dying, businesses closed, churches are canceled, politicians are screaming. All of it is beyond our control. Number 2, we have no idea the outcome of all this. We don't. We don't know when and how this virus will be under control, how many people will die before we get a successful vaccine, who will win the election, who will serve as the new justice on the Supreme Court, what the next administration will do, what's going to happen with our economy, what's going to happen with small businesses, schools, our retirement. Who knows? We are in the dark when it comes to a lot of what's happening today and what will happen tomorrow. And that has caused an immense amount of fear to rise within so many of us. Out of control, unable to predict what's next. And number 3, what we can do is the next right thing, whatever it is, and leave the consequences to God. Now I know the response. What's the next right thing, Scott? That's what trips us up. We don't know. And the reason why many of us don't know is because we look for the next right thing in places that would lend to being something big, something grand, something special, something people will talk about. We think after listening to a message like this, well, if a foreign king ever forces me to bow down to an idol or lose my life, I'll choose the right thing and not bow. And then we subconsciously dismiss it because we know we won't ever be faced with that kind of decision anyway. But we feel good because we think we made the right decision in our minds. And we miss the next right thing in front of us. You see, the next right thing is in front of you even as I speak, but it is so close and so small, we miss it. Like listening to this message right now. Like driving home with your family or friends after church, or after you go out to get some dinner and you're driving home in the van or the truck. How do you interact with them? How do you love them? Like lending your ear to a loved one when they need to talk. Like doing your best at work this week. Like giving a significant portion of your income to support the work of the gospel through Forest Park. Like loving your neighbor. Like welcoming the stranger. Like treating the cashier with kindness. Like serving in your local church. We have such a difficult time living in the now, right here, right now. We imagine the future and ignore the present. See, when it comes to messages like this one, we make the application huge and disconnected rather than small and present in the here and now. When those three young men bowed, they thought of the right thing to do here, now. The only thing about the future they thought about was, whatever happens, God will be with us. Listen very carefully. Fear is fueled by lack of control and unpredictability. Fear is squelched by seizing the moment and trusting God to handle the consequences. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know who holds tomorrow. I don't know what's in our future, but I know who is in our future. I don't know when trouble will find us, but I know when trouble does, God will not leave us. He will be in the fire, standing next to us. You can be assured. Will you join with me in prayer? Father, we bring ourselves to you today. We bring our fears, we bring our worries, we bring all the things that this season has dumped onto our lap. And we say we can't do it in and of ourselves. We come to you for rest. And one of the things that has drained many of us is fear. We don't know what's going to happen, and we're not in control of the outcome. And that causes fear to rise within us. But Father, just like those three boys, when they faced uncertainty, when they faced consequences that seemed beyond their control, and it was, they did the right thing in the moment, and they trusted you with the outcome. Father, will you teach us every morning when we wake up to look at our day and say, today I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to love my wife. I'm going to love my husband. I'm going to pray. I'm going to treat people with kindness. I'm going to serve others. I'm going to help other people. I'm going to do the next right thing that is in front of me. And I'm going to trust you with the consequences of doing that. Father, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know you hold tomorrow in your hands. May we trust you. May we rely on you. May we bring our fears to you, fears that have drained us, lay them in front of you and exchange them for rest. Exchange them for the strength we need. We thank you and we ask these things in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thanks for watching this video. While you're here, make sure you subscribe and turn the bell on so you don't miss any other videos or content Forest Park releases. Make sure you share this with a friend. Take a few moments and check out some other things Forest Park has.